Good morning. I hope everything is blooming in your world and your Friday is filled with lots of happy thoughts. We made it. It's Friday. We're here. So the idea of matriarchy, when you hear the word matriarchy, I encourage you to think about what that means to you. There are so many definitions to this word. For one, matriarchy is defined as a system of society or government ruled by a woman or women, or it's the state of being an older, powerful woman in your family. When I hear the word, I think about my grandmothers, my aunties, my mothers. I use mothers intentionally, and I encourage you to reflect on your own life, and chances are you have been mothered by several people. When I think of matriarchy, I think of so much. But one of the memories I cherish the most happened a few weeks before I had to move to America from South Africa after getting married. I think about a lineup of women that my mother put together to come to her house to speak with me days before I left. Each day it was a different auntie coming through the house, all bearing gifts or words of wisdom. I think about the auntie who taught me Xhosa hymns, knowing that prayer would have to guide my journey. The auntie who told me to always have a secret stash of money outside of the bank account I shared with my husband, because the auntie who told me to always keep, a couple of non-married friends so I could always be hip. And oh yes, the auntie who gave me a cookbook for cooking authentic South African meals. Then there was the auntie who blessed me with money, and an auntie who took one look at my cute earrings and said, "Give me those in China. They have lots of jewelry in America. You don't need more earrings. I'm gonna take those." I think about all these women, all the different personalities that were exhibited in that week. This was matriarchy at play, but mostly, I think about my own biological mother, Yolanda Sangweni, a Renaissance woman and an activist who was, to me, the embodiment of a dynamic, mischievous, get shit done kind of matriarch. My mother was not to be fucked with. She always said to me, "Daughter, you must have friends in high and low places." My mother was a social chameleon, able to navigate her way in so many environments. I think about her a lot when I think about matriarchy. And flipping over, I also think about the creative women whose words, art, activism mothered me. I think about Toni Morrison, Miriam Makeba, Winnie Mandela, Nina Simone, Audre Lorde, Cesaria Evora, Alice Walker, Joni Mitchell. The names are endless to me, because when I went searching for myself, these women held up a mirror for me and they said, "Here you are." Most recently, when I think of matriarchy, I think of Sha'Carri Richardson becoming an Olympian and knowing that the most important place she needed to be was in her grandmother's arms, cradling her bosom, because we know a grandma's embrace can heal everything. Jack, could you play that moment for us? Man, I don't know how many times I've watched that clip and the way Sha'Carri clung to her grandmother, because we know, as I said, a grandmother's arms, her words, her kiss can really change everything. I also think about In Our Mother's Garden, a phenomenal film directed by, can I call you my sister, Chantelle? Because I feel like you're my sister.
If you don't call me your sister,
This film is directed by Chantelle P. Lewis. You can watch it on Netflix. In Our Mother's Gardens sets out to show how Black maternal lineages have shaped the idea of Black womanhood. Chantelle is here to tell us more about the film, but also to kick it and talk about matriarchy and her creative process. Welcome, Chantelle.
Oh, thank you, Yolanda. First of all, I'm not a morning person, so shout out to everybody. I'm just gonna keep it real in full transparency. I was like texting Yolanda, getting told off by my husband, who's like, "It's early in the morning and you talking on the phone." I'm like, "Cause I gotta do creative mornings, CC, 8:30." So I'm very excited to be here with my sister, with your beautiful, gorgeous, vibrant stuff. I got this red lipstick on for you, by the way. FYI, I was like, let me put on a yellow dress, put my lipstick on and my earrings, because I'm gonna be in conversation with Yolanda.
You're so funny. When you don't have hair, all you gotta do is, I gotta work with bangs. I got bangs. but also
Listen,
lipstick when you don't have hair. You got to accentuate.
I know.
Chantelle, is it okay if I read your bio because you are just so phenomenal?
If you
You
must.
good? Okay, good. Yay! All right. Chantrelle is a Howard University alum, of course, New Orleans native. She's a United Nations Program for People of African Descent fellow, a multi-hyphen creative and scholar who assesses multiple disciplines to help educate African diasporic history, aesthetics, culture, and spirituality. Her directorial debut premiered at the Black Star Film Festival in 2020 and won the Shine Award for Best Film from a Philadelphia-based filmmaker. So In Our Mother's Gardens, as we said, it premiered in May. It's been released by Ava DuVernay's Array production house and has received critical acclaim by audiences globally. Chantrelle is also the author of Dandelion, The Black Dandy and Street Style, which was published in 2017. You can find Chantrelle's work in the New York Times, LA Times, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, NPR, Washington Post, and so much more. She's also the co-founder of Shop Black with her husband and fellow Howard alum, Tony Oluwatoyin Lawson. Chantrelle is an initiated Lukumi Sango priest, also a self-identifying hoodooist. She can be found waxing poetics about all things African spirituality online at Boku Hoodoo. Welcome, Chantrelle. You got to tell me about Boku Hoodoo, what that means. I think I want to kick it off there. What does that mean?
Oh, that's where we're gonna start.
Let's go right there. You have on your yellow. We're ready.
As the Gemini in me was like posting about my, I'm multitasking, posting about my ancestors in his talk that I did with Dr. Coco, who I know as Mama Coco. If anyone's seen the film, majority of the women, besides Yolanda, Yolanda, Tina, and Latham were the only women I did not already have like a 10, 15 plus year relationship with. One of those women, Mama Coco, is one of my elder god sisters in the Lukumi tradition, which is one of the derivatives of Yoruba spirituality that persists and exists in the diaspora, in the African diaspora, that survived the transatlantic slave trade. She's one of my elder god sisters, one of my former professors in African spirituality at Temple, and one of my mentors. And so hoodoo is an African diasporic religious system practiced by African Americans and now people from the diaspora because of the growing interest in hoodoo and the education about it and the enlightenment about it. That was primarily practiced in the US by enslaved Africans as a tool of resistance and survival. It came to us by way of the Congo and Bantu speaking peoples. Zora Neale Hurston, who's one of my patron saints, called New Orleans the largest site of hoodoo in the US. It's been bastardized amongst African spiritual traditions, unlike amongst like people of the diaspora and scholars, unlike Vodou, which is practiced in Haiti, Benin, and New Orleans, Candomblé, which is practiced in Brazil, Santeria, which is practiced in Puerto Rico, and Cuba, here in the United States, and really around the world. And so hoodoo is a lesser known tradition, but is seen everywhere, particularly as African Americans migrated from the South to the North. They brought those traditions with them to like heal themselves, to protect themselves in a myriad of different ways. So hoodoo could literally mean like putting a little honey on your tongue before you go and have a difficult conversation with somebody. It could literally mean put somebody in the freezer because you want them to stay the fuck away from you. You know what I'm saying? Like, could mean put some hot foot powder, like before you're in front of your neighbor's doorsteps if they were a little bit problematic. But it was used as a tool of survival, and it comes from an ancient a multitude of ancient African traditions.
Oh wow! Oh, that sounds amazing. We're probably going to go back to spirituality, but I want to just kick off by asking about your own family. Who's the matriarch in your family? And can you tell me more about them?
Definitely. So my mother is absolutely the matriarch. They used to call my mom, I don't know if anybody ever watched Dallas, but it was that lady on Dallas. What was her name? Miss
Alexis?
Miss Chancellor. I think that was on Dallas, right? Yeah, most people on here probably don't even know because I'm like, that's the like 1980s daytime soap opera television or whatever. But anyway, they used to call my mama Miss Chancellor. I think that was from Dallas. But you know, I realized in the film that, like, in doing the film, I realized that my mom became it was a Young and the Restless. Yes, thank you. That my mother became a matriarch before her time. I had a family of matriarchs as well as patriarchs. I would say that, you know, there was a balance between like masculine and feminine energy in my family, in terms of like both the men in my family and the women in my family who were exemplars of excellence and hard work and values. But my mother, because she's the oldest girl, and my grandmother was the only child, so my mother is closer with my grandfather's, you know, family, his siblings, their children. There weren't many other girls, so she's, you know, seen as the matriarch, and she is definitely, it's like what Pat says goes. Whether it's my cousins, who she said that you are a child underneath me, you know, myself, my brothers, as grown as I am, she still sees me as her child. Like, even when I was just at home in New Orleans, I was like, Ma, like, I'm 43 years, I'm a whole grown ass woman, but I am a child in my mother's eyes. So my mother is definitely the matriarch of our family, taking care of everybody, holding everybody down, telling us what to do, you know, and just loving up on us in a multitude of ways.
Do you think, you know, do you think you will have to be the matriarch? You're next in line? Is that your...
It is my lineage.
Yeah.
Even though I have some older cousins who are women, it is my lineage, and it's something that I'm grappling with, particularly as I've had some challenges with my family as it relates to like trauma that I won't go into right now because I don't want to trigger people first thing in the morning. But I was like, wow, I'm going to be next in line. And so that comes with that responsibility. So in ways that I've sometimes distanced myself from my family, I'm like, I need to get it together because, you know, when my mama is not here, hopefully she'll be here for a long time because I'm not signing up for that anytime soon. Particularly because my brother will probably challenge me on me being a matriarch.
Yes.
Everybody else will be here for it. It'll be my baby brother who thinks he's my big brother to challenge me on that. But, you know, it's a huge responsibility that I don't want to sign up for before my time. So... yeah. But I think the responsibility is there. The lineage is definitely there. And it's something that I'll embrace, you know, when I need to.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell me about the matriarchy that you witnessed in your family and also just in New Orleans overall, how it influences the art that you put out in the world?
So, you know, I can actually... I grew up around a lot of older people. And I think when you grow up around your grandparents and older people, like, you know, you were talking about all of these women in your family, the grandmothers, the aunties, you show up in the world in a different way. And I think there's a disconnect generationally sometimes with people that I see, and even some of my friends who I'm like, oh, you didn't grow up around old people. Because you would just sometimes go to their house and it'd be like silence. And it wasn't about your entertainment. You know what I mean? It was like, if they want to listen to some old church music, you know, if they want to listen to some other like old blues, whatever it was, like you just had to sit there and be, right? Like listen, observe, think, ponder, gather like information and be. And so, you know, I have early vivid memories of, like, first of all, I grew up around my great grandmothers. You know, I knew 3 of my great grandmothers. Wow. Mama Ada, Mama Verna, and my great grandma Hilda, who was actually of Haitian descent. And, you know, so I had this like example of these older Black women who lived to be like over 100 years old. And then there was like who we call Cousin Irma. In New Orleans, cousin is cousin. Okay. So Cousin Irma, who was the wealthiest woman that I know, she owned the funeral home, which had been passed down from her father, who was the first Black man to open up a funeral home on the West Bank of New Orleans. And so, you know, I own some of her furs. Like, Cousin Irma had money, she had furs, she had nice cars, she was a businesswoman. And so it was like, if anybody needed to borrow money, it was like, go to Cousin Irma, right? And
there's always a Cousin Irma in every family.
Right. You know, it's like that big mama, you know, who was this like powerful woman who had her own, who owned her own. And, you know, and so that at a very early age, it let me know that I was free to do and be whatever I wanted to wear. I never felt oppressed by my gender. I mean, only when there was this expectation for me to behave. I was a very like gender bending tomboy. And so it was when I was like expected to behave a certain way, like being a dark skinned, loud, you know, Black girl in New Orleans, when my family's like wanted me to be more demure or be less opinionated. Or what rather my mom wanted me to be that way.
Miss Pat.
Right, Miss Pat. But you know, they always encouraged me to like have something for myself, to keep something for myself, to own something for myself, to follow my dreams, to like study, to know myself, to engage with my identity and my heritage. So I always, even though there were like the men in my family were storytellers, the way the women moved in my family about the world with their level of confidence, like there were men in their lives, but it wasn't like they were dependent on these men for their life and their freedom and their thoughts. You know, they were in partnership. And so I learned that at a very early age.
I love it. I love it. You know, outside of your family, who are the matriarchs of your creativity? I heard you use the phrase patron saint, referring to Zora Neale Hurston. Who are the other patron saints or matriarchs?
Definitely Zora, who was also a Howardite. You know, a lot of people don't know that. She went to Howard University. She actually founded the Hilltop newspaper.
I didn't know that.
And so, I mean, she was like an older student. She was dating younger men, you know, living her best life, you know. So she's definitely one of my patron saints. Catherine Dunham, who was an anthropologist like Zora Neale Hurston, who studied African spirituality, who traveled back and forth to Haiti, where she actually initiated into voodoo under the god or Loa Dambala, who is a snake god. And so Saint Joan of Arc was my first patron saint. You know, I grew up Black Catholic in New Orleans. I definitely resonated with her, the masculine energy of her warrior spirit, which, you know, it was easy for me to transition into like African spirituality because of that Catholicism. But Saint Joan of Arc was definitely, you know, my first like role model of like, in terms of like iconographic, you know, archetype of what a woman can, how she can exist in the world.
I love that. Can I tell you a quick story? I applied to Howard University because I read somewhere that Toni Morrison went to Howard. I was like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to study English. She studied English. I'm going to study English. I did all of that. I didn't know Zora went to Howard.
Yeah. And I know that Toni went to Howard, but much later in life. But I can't imagine had I known, you know, those things when I was like in high school. I was just like, I want to go to a Black school. Yes. And I want to be around some fine ass Black men from around the world and study, of course.
Of course. That was like 25% of the work.
Right.
Chantelle, when did you realize that you were an artist and a creative person?
I think I still argue with identifying as an artist. Excuse me, even though one of my friends, Erica, who's also in the film, she's been calling me an artist since, I don't know, Kingdom Come. But I think because my background, like in school, was science, I went to Howard like a bio pre-med major, and I would double major in African American studies. I've always seen myself as a scientist, and even as a curator, I think there's like a science to like curating, like from an African-centered, you know, through an African-centered lens and worldview. So I've always been a creative, though. I think I'm a Gemini, so I did all things as a child. I mean, I cross-stitched and did latch hook, and I drew and, you know, played music and, you know, read and wrote. And so I've always been creative. But I think in my professional life, I've started to embrace that identity more, particularly as I was morphing from, like, my exhibitions. I think from a Western art perspective, most curators who are trained to translate art from a very Eurocentric lens, centered the art. And I always said, I don't give a fuck about the art. And not to be dismissive about it, but I'm like, I'm interested in the stories behind the art. Like, what was your grandmother like? You know, what was your environment like? Like, what shaped you as an artist? Because I'm like, from an African perspective, traditionally, art always functions to do something. Yes, you know, whether it was from our hairstyles to our dances, to the sculptures and the masks, you know, to the textiles, art always had a function. Like in 1926, Du Bois is also one of my, well, you know, I guess, creative spiritual patriarchs, but Du Bois said, I don't give a damn about art that's not used for propaganda in 1926. Wow. And so my work as a curator was always centered there. I want to know it was the context of the art that was most important for me. And so the more I started to realize and unpack that, like just my own curatorial practice, it allowed me to embrace the concept of like, actually, I'm coming up with these ideas and these concepts. I'm inviting artists in to be in conversation with me and the ideas that I'm having that's rooted in something deeper than all of us. And that hopefully is functioning in a particular way when people have an experience inside of the museum, and not like for some random reasons or for just the sake of art, but to do something, to function in a particular type of way. And so I think it's over the past like few years that I've really started to embrace that, you know, identity more.
You know, Chantelle, I want to ask you just further into that, but also encourage everyone in the audience to think about this. Are you comfortable? Yes, you've just shared that maybe it took a while to be comfortable with calling yourself an artist. Are you comfortable with the multitudes that exist inside of you? I ask that because I also struggle with, there are so many ways that I express myself and share myself with the world, and I sometimes get uncomfortable with how many multitudes exist, because I was taught that, you know, you're one thing, you go to school, you be a doctor, that's it, you be a lawyer, and that's it, and you move on. And then, you know, when you have these multitudes, you want to express yourself in so many ways. And I want to ask you, like, you know, the artist in you, the curator in you, the community organizer, the spiritual work, like there's so many multitudes to you. How are you comfortable with that? And can you share how we can, you know, if you are, better be comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a Gemini. So you cannot not be a Gemini and be all things. And I remember my mom used to always say, oh, you're going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. So I was always self-conscious about that, but always resistant to that, because I'm like, if I'm thinking about it, I'm interested in it, why shouldn't I explore it? And if I get bored of it and I want to go do something else, then why shouldn't I do that, right? And so I resisted that. And then, you know, she will always say that, even like, I remember I told my family, I have a VHS footage of me telling my family I wasn't going to medical school. My senior year, right before graduation, my grandmother was like, what? Like, I said, I'm gonna be an entertainer. She's like, an entertain what? She had a couple drinks by this point. So they were not having it, but I was always comfortable in exploring my truth, right? And so I realized though, because I would always like even question myself, like I'm going from like, you know, wanting to be a physician to wanting to be like on radio and TV, to then switching to like Africana studies, becoming a curator, you know, leaving that to like do film and do this like social entrepreneurship platform with my husband. But what I realized is the running thread that's always been linking everything is my commitment and passion to studying and amplifying the history and the culture of Black people. My commitment to the liberation of Black people. Since I knew how to read at the age of 3, I was reading about the Haitian Revolution, of which I'm the descendant of Henri Christophe, who was one of the leaders of the Haitian Revolution and the king of Haiti. I've been reading and studying and learning about my history. In 9th grade, I was reading Asada's autobiography and telling my classmates, you need to be reading about this woman who was a Black Panther, who is living in Cuba, you know, in this very thick New Orleans accent. So that's always been a connecting thread, like my love, my passion, my commitment to Black people. And so even I'm very like, I'm very clear that I'm not interested in being in the film industry. I'm going to do a number of films, tell a few stories with television, film, and then I'm going to go get my PhD and, study Surinamese culture, the Surinamese Maroons and South America, and how Black Dutch art and history and culture, why is it significant a part of the diaspora that we don't talk about? I'm going to maybe be the president of Howard University. Like, I'm going to own boutique hotels. Like, these are all the things that I want to, you know what I mean, that I want to do. I was like telling you that before COVID hit, I went to South Africa for the first time in all of my travels. And it was like there were three extremely transformational trips that I've been on in my life. The first time I went to Brazil, the first time I went to the Netherlands, and definitely South Africa. That were like paradigm shifting trips for me. And I was trying to buy a property to open up a boutique hotel. So I can't be put into a box. And I look at my patron saints, W.E.B. Du Bois. He wrote plays. He was a political activist. He was a scholar. He was an anthropologist. He was a sociologist. Like, you know what I mean? He was a dandy. Like, he was a curator. I mean, he did all of, lived in Ghana, where he, passed away, was close friends with Kwame Nkrumah. Like, they were not inside of these boxes. And so why should I put myself inside and limit myself in that way? I think that the less we focus on other people's ideas and thoughts about who we should be in the world, the more we commit to ourselves to, studying ourselves. Like, yes, Raquel, no limit, like a no limit soldier, right? Yes. Like, there's I don't know if anybody knows about the Mardi Gras Indian culture. It's when we talk about creativity, I grew up, in the streets of New Orleans, where there would be little boys playing French horns in the projects, and we saw our art, like it was drenched in the humidity of the city, like Africanness in modernity in New Orleans, the Mardi Gras Indian tradition. One of the things that they say is won't bend, won't bow, don't know how. So that is the ethos of
say that again.
Won't bend, won't bow, don't know how.
Wow.
So that, that is my framework of how to be and live and thrive and create in the world.
Oh, I'm keeping that. Oh, sorry. I just had to take a moment. Yeah. Can you tell me more about your creative practice and where you find inspiration? Do you have a ritual that you take in when you're about to start a creative project, or just your practice?
I think it's also multifaceted. Like, literally right now on my desk, I got like tarot cards. You know what I mean? I was literally asking myself, like, I promised my husband that I was going to focus on building our platform, Shop Black, which is a platform to support and celebrate Black-owned businesses globally. That's been at the back burner of, my work as I've worked on all these other projects, and I said I was going to focus on this, but I want to do this other film. And like, literally last night, I was pulling a card, like, should I focus, like, just do Shop Black or do the film? So like the seven of baskets, which is like the 7 of cups, came up, and it's basically like confirmed the fact that I have all of these options and decisions and choices, before me. But I picked up, but then I was like, okay, duh, I know that. You're already confirming ancestors, what I already know. And so I was like, so what should I do? And Father Sims represents temperance in the traditional hoodoo deck. And he was a hoodooist in New Orleans. And so it talked about how he did like work for good and sometimes like, use his powers for good and evil. But the card just talks about, again, balance, right? And not being an extremist. And so it just told me, like, I don't have to necessarily choose one or the other, like focus on Shop Black, you know what I mean? But I don't have to just, because that is anti who I am, Yeah. I definitely get thought early in the morning, is where I get a lot of my thoughts in the shower, sitting by bodies of water. So I have a things to do notebook that I've been using, like I'm very analog, like I'm a Gen Xer who's like super analog. So 5 subject notebook.
Here I am. I'm every day I'm in this is a small one, but I have like 20 of these per year.
Listen, this book, which I have the sections, and I've been doing this for years. Like, first of all, and I'm also very much so a goal setter, you know, like, and I've been one since I was like 13. I see Raquel like also lifting hers up. But I also have another planner. So I have that, I have this planner, and I have this is my calendar. So, you know, I even write in different ink for different things. So, you know, I'm like, do what works for you. There was a book that I can't remember. It was a book about different people's processes, like creative people. It was called Daily Rituals, actually.
Ooh,
Of creative people throughout history. I mean, of all different races and ethnic groups and genders and identities. And it was so illuminating for me because like some people get up and they do their daily pages. I can't write, like my muscles and my hands start to hurt after a while. So I'm like, I tried daily pages, like from the Artist Way, and I'm like, can't do that. You know,
I write maybe like, you know, 3 sentences, you know.
Yeah. Doing anything habitually is a little bit of a challenge for me. So I just think that, you know, some people take walks, like, you know, some people, like, I mean, people dance, some people like go out and look at other work. Like sometimes also listening to music, like music is so important to me. Listening to music, like whatever works for you though, I think I will tell you this. A while ago, a very long time ago, I did something where I started writing down my best practices, like doing things early in the morning. It's against my best practices, right? So I typically don't do it. I don't catch early morning flights. I'm going to miss them. So instead of trying to fight against our nature, I think sometimes to be like what other people think or how people think we should create and do, I think really tap into who you are. That might be coming to you from your ancestors. You know, it might be just in your DNA and your makeup. And so I think sometimes you need to lean into that as opposed to, go with your own flow. So that's really a part of my ritual.
I would also encourage people to put the phone far away from you when you go to sleep. Don't wake up and go straight to your phone, because sometimes, you know, if you're in the creative space, you don't want to be distracted by so much. And so many things want our attention right now. And I think it can be really challenging to be an artist in this, and your mind is just being pulled, whether it's Instagram, Facebook. So like, give yourself, even if it's an hour a day, to just not be connected to anything and just go inside, you know? So I especially love that in the morning, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in the morning for anyone.
Can I share? I will also say, and because I think sometimes when we go on social media, a lot of us, like some of us, we use the social media in different ways. Some of it is to like promote our work, you know, to make money. Some of it is to get inspiration. Some of us to communicate with friends. Some of us is for like news. And sometimes when we see other people doing other things, we begin to compare ourselves. It applies pressure on us, like, oh, why am I not there yet in my career? Or why is this person getting opportunities and not me? And so you can create a lot of like self-doubt sometimes with social media. And so sometimes that's why it's like really good to just focus. I think something else I used to do years ago was I would go on these communication hiatuses where I just went and talk to like friends, family. I wouldn't be on social media. I wouldn't talk on the phone. I would just go in, like in the tarot cards, it's called like the Hermit, you know, card, and where you just like go in. And I think that that's important too, to have that quiet time as well.
Yeah. And now to talk about In Our Mother's Gardens, I mean, you've had a 2021 phenomenal, just, you know, the film is on Netflix, everyone. You worked with Ava DuVernay's Array distribution hub to get the project on Netflix. But tell me about, just go back a little bit. How did you arrive at this project?
Going back to my spirituality, like, you know, my spirituality has always been central to who I am. And in a reading, so in our tradition, we do divination. A lot of, just about all, I'm gonna go ahead and say all, which is hard to like lump something in those categorical ways by, you know, just saying all or none. But, you know, all African spiritual traditions have divination practices as a part of the tradition. And so one of the things that one of my elders told me was that I needed to do work with women. My Orisha, which is like my patron saint, is Shango, who's the god of thunder and lightning. He's hyper masculine. But my godfather said, you know, women are the kingmakers. you know? And so like, if you want to be a king, then you need to work with women. And for most of my career, I have been doing work around Black dandyism and studying, global Black dandyism and masculinity within style of people of African descent. And so it was like a thing. It wasn't like work that I knew I needed to do, or it wasn't something I've been saying forever. Like, oh, I want to do a film about Black women, and our traumas and our mamas. That wasn't never a goal of mine. It was something. It was spirit led, and so when it came out of me, really, I would say the driving force, because I had been collecting these stories, like working on another project, never thinking they were going to be a part of a film. Mm-hmm. I went to South Africa and I came back, and there the story was. Wow. And I kid you not, because I was real disgruntled about, I don't feel like doing this, but I had to do this work. And literally I sat down, I put up a picture of my grandmother, and then the film and the story poured out of me. I never intended for myself to be a part of the story. And even though I had I filmed myself, I got myself on camera, telling parts of my story. But I kept looking down the entire time because the person who was interviewing me wasn't giving me eye contact. So I was like, I don't have enough footage to cover over this. And then in the process of editing the film, I found, and the process of the pandemic, I found VHS footage that had been sitting in storage with old tapes of me, my grandmother, my mother, that I was able to insert. And so in my own process of healing, with, parts of my relationship with my mom, and thinking about self-care and thinking about our ancestors, this film, was pieced together. Mm-hmm. And, now we have in our Mother's Gardens, which is the title actually, is a nod to Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, which is her seminal text on womanist theory, for Black women who identify as feminists or womanists.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you my last question, and also we're going to open it up just to have people share their thoughts, have questions for us. And Chantelle, I imagine that every project that you work on teaches you something about yourself. What did this one teach you? Either about yourself, about women, about matriarchy, about, what are the lessons from this exploration of Black matriarchy?
One of the things that, my friend Tarana said in the film was that healing is possible, and for a lot of us, we don't know that. One of the things that you said, and I'm trying not to get emotional. I'm like, why am I so emotional right now? One of the things that you said, you talked about, showing up and taking up space, but you also really talked about community care. And that was something that I did not have in the film, because going in, I was like, I wanted to focus on self-care. And even the woman that I interviewed, I was like, I could have interviewed, I have so many, I pledged the biggest sorority in the world, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated at Alpha Chapter, just Howard University. I'm surrounded by Black women, amazing, dope ass Black. I went to Howard, we're the creme de la creme. I'm sorry if you went to an Ivy League school, Black people, and you're like Black Harvard, Black Yale. We are the creme de la creme at Howard University. They don't call us Howard Mafia for nothing. And so I didn't have to go far outside of my community to, find amazing, dope ass Black women to interview. But I was really interested in women who were engaged in a particular type of way with the women in their family, and also who were at least trying to do the work of embodying self-care and wrestling with it, right? And when you talked about community care and how important that is, that was something that really sat with me. Because I think that so many of us are trying to survive, and I'm trying to thrive out here. I'm like, fuck surviving. I want to thrive. But I also can't thrive if the people around me are not well, And so that's a level of commitment to make sure that, ensure in a safe way with boundaries in place, that we're taking care of each other, and not just ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really, what I learned. And like I said before about my mother being a matriarch, which allowed me to give my mama grace that I was not able to do growing up, That was important to me.
I could talk to you forever, ever and ever, ever, ever. I'm just going to open it up to see if folks have any questions, thoughts. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be just a reflection on this topic. What does matriarchy mean to you? And if you could name some of the people, who are your matriarchs? Tell us.